The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory, Commissioner Jean-Pierre Oriol joins us to discuss the comprehensive land and water use plan, the status of public libraries, the environmental impact of sewage spills, and other priorities being addressed by the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. Plus, we examine a new law that lifts time limits on civil lawsuits for childhood sexual abuse, but officials are raising concerns about retroactivity and legal clarity.
The new recommended date of October 1, 2025 gives the plan sponsor 9 months.
The government employees' retirement system has postponed a 3% employer contribution increase after the governor cited financial strains and uncertainty over the rum cover-over tax extender. We'll explore what this means for the pension system, and later, we'll take a closer look at the whistleblower lawsuit filed by former RT Park CEO Peter Chapman, who claims he was forced out for standing up to unethical actions by board members. Stay tuned as this week's panel joins the conversation to analyze these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. The Department of Planning and Natural Resources is at the forefront of addressing key issues in the Virgin Islands, from protecting the environment to restoring public and cultural resources.
We are at a transformational time in our history right now, where we are setting the stage for what we want our islands to look like in the future.
One of DPNR's most ambitious projects is the Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. This 198-page draft reflects years of research, collaboration, and community input from 91 volunteers and 15 town hall meetings, including the most recent in June. With the public comment period now closed, DPNR is now moving to the next phase, refining the plan and laying the groundwork for implementation, with a focus on balancing sustainable development and environmental preservation. Uninsured abandoned boats left behind after the storms remain a costly problem for the territory and a challenging issue for DPNR. The department is working to remove these vessels and explore ways to hold owners accountable to prevent similar issues in the future. At the same time, residents are still waiting for the reopening of public libraries, which have been closed due to long-delayed renovations. The closures have left many without access to critical resources, prompting lawmakers to push for faster action. DPNR has committed to moving these projects forward. In preserving the territory's history, DPNR is managing millions in grants to restore landmarks damaged by Hurricanes Irma and Maria, an investment in protecting cultural heritage for future generations. Meanwhile, ongoing sewage spills continue to impact the territory, with recent overflows into Christiansted Harbor on St. Croix and the waterfront in St. Thomas raising environmental concerns for residents. Many are worried about the effects on the Virgin Islands' marine ecosystem and coastal waters, and they are looking to DPNR for solutions to protect these vital resources. Joining us on set to discuss these challenges and the progress being made is Jean-Pierre Oriol, Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. Welcome to Comes with the Territory, Mr. Oriol.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best, pleasant for the season to you and yours and all the listening and viewing public.
Same to you and yours. Now, very briefly, give us some background on the plan for the Land and Water Use Plan. This is the final phase has been submitted. Speak to me about that.
Sure. So we're going before the Legislature's Committee of the Whole on the 17th of December, and we are presenting our final plan, the Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. And again, we did it a little bit differently than has been submitted to the legislature in years prior to. What this focuses on is the visioning for the territory. And so it really outlines the different sectors that we feel need to be addressed, it establishes some goals and policies in each of those sectors, but we really wanted to focus and agree on what the vision for the territory moving forward would be. And once we can get that passed, then some of the more regulatory issues, more VI code updates, those types of things that are more actionable and more enforcement driven, then the department will begin to pursue those, and we'll have visioning for the specific towns and those types of things in the near future. But first we wanted to make sure that we could get agreement on the goals and policies and get those codified and then move forward from there.
What do you anticipate maybe one of the biggest challenges kind of implementing the plan, as we move the territory forward?
So overall, I think capacity, no matter where we are right now, is going to be the biggest challenge. Whether that's capacity within the department to be able to enforce the things that we agree upon, having the capital to actually, let's say, if we call for a certain industry to move from one portion of the island to a different portion of the island, what does that capital look like in order to make that or bring that to fruition? But one of the things that we tried to do was not to come up with anything on our own, but rather, particularly for departments and funding, to adopt the plans that they are using and they are moving forward right now. Again, we recognize that we are in a transformational period here in the territory, having availed ourselves to about $12 billion, and I think every month it goes up 13 billion, 14 billion. Those numbers are transformational in nature, and so it's for us to work with our sister agencies and say, hey, we're here to help with the planning aspects of what you want to do. We've discussed where certain things can happen, where certain things should go or possibly be moved to, or where expansion should be. And we're prepared to work with our sister agencies on those implementation tactics because there is funding available to the territory.
Now, after the legislative process, how long do you anticipate the timeline for the overall rollout of it?
So I think we are ready. DPNR will be ready to get to work immediately in the 36th legislature to start for more of the codified changes. It will begin with, in 2014, we actually submitted a piece of legislation to the legislature for a revamping of our zoning code. And rather than having it be so stringent as it is, to soften it up and be more flexible to allow for certain things. For example, home-based businesses right now have to go before the legislature to get zoning variances. Those will be things that if we were to reduce the rigidity in our table of permitted uses from a zoning perspective, we could handle those things in-house rather than having to go to the legislature. So this is something that was proposed in 2014. We pulled it back. We wanted to make sure we got the comprehensive plan and the vision set. Mm-hmm. And then now about 90% of the things in that piece of legislation are still applicable today. So we have something within the first 6 to 8 months that we would be able to work with the legislature on and start pushing forward.
Okay, and I know we can continue speaking about this, but I want to talk about, we're going to talk now about the abandoned boats and derelict boats that have been left in the harbor, both on St. Thomas and on St. Croix. Speak to me on where the department stands right now and what's being done.
Sure. So the department, what we did is, in anticipation, although we know that there was a presidential disaster declaration approved for Tropical Storm Ernesto, what we did is we moved some funding around locally in order to be able to start the process. And so we are actually in the final stages of our contracting for the removal of the vessels, 6 of 8 vessels in the St. Thomas district. On the St. Croix side, we've just received some of the quotations and the costs, and we are also anticipating that by the end of December, early January, our awards from FEMA will actually be awarded to the department as well. And so now we're eligible to reimburse any costs that we've incurred for the first 6 vessels on St. Thomas, and then we'll be able to use the FEMA funding for the removal of the remaining vessels across the territory.
And that's what I wanted to get into, because this is somewhat of a financial burden on the department to now have to go and secure funding, look for that funding to deal with this. How is the department going forward planning on addressing those boat owners who are uninsured and prevent this from happening again in the future?
Sure. So there's 2 avenues that we can address this particular situation. The first, which could, it's a direct cost to the vessel owners in that if you are a mooring holder, one of the requirements must be that you have insurance. The issue would become that the cost for the salvaging of the vessel could be just as costly as the vessel itself. We don't have a large haul-out location here in the territory for a 45-foot, 50-foot boat, that sort of thing. And so when you're talking about how much it costs to haul out a vessel of that size, you're looking at potentially $30,000, $40,000. So insurance on that cost alone is going to be something that is pretty substantial. Another way to do it is actually, we have about 4,600 registered vessels in the territory. And so the other way to do it would be to impose an environmental fee on every single one of those vessels. If we did $100 on 4,600, then we have 460,000 that would be available to rescue boats, to salvage them.
In the event that something like this happens again.
happens.
Now, I want to ask you, after Tropical Storm Ernesto, we saw raw sewage flowing into the Charlotte Amalie Harbor. Now, there was, and that has delayed efforts to remove the vessel.
Yes.
Now, a contractor reported dangerously high levels in bacteria and who unfortunately got sick attempting to remove the vessel. Has anyone else reported, becoming health or has the department heard anything about this?
No. So the contractor, one of the things that we do on a weekly basis is we actually test all the swimming beaches in the territory. And we put out a weekly beach report. It comes out every Friday so that persons going to the beach Friday, Saturday, Sunday have an updated beach water quality report. So the harbors where the sewage leaks have taken place are not typically where anybody really swims. But we do know that the bacteria levels in the harbors have been high due to whether it's the collapsed line in Noragata and St. Thomas, the failed pump stations that have been happening in St. Croix, and then the sewage then backs up, overflows, and then it trickles into the Christiansted boardwalk area and other locations. So, those areas, again, we've seen where Waste Management has put up the signage. We continue to monitor the swimming beaches on a weekly basis for bacteria to make sure that we're providing our residents most accurate information for them regarding whether or not it's safe to swim. We're working with the Waste Management Authority, hopefully that they can correct some of these issues pretty soon, and then we can negate all the backups and sewage outfall and arrests that we're having, those types of things. So.
Yeah, and I know Waste Management has been trying to address this. This is a problem. The department, is trying. Is there anything else from DPNR's side? Because of course, people are concerned. Is there anything else that the department is doing or is ramping up or could be doing more to help, alleviate any of these issues?
Yes. So, part of the issue is that the Waste Management Authority is dealing really with failing or aged equipment. So I do sit on the board for the Waste Management Authority, and at that meeting in September, they reported that of their 33 pump station, 19 pumps, or 61% of them have failed. We manage something called the Clean Water Act grants from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that allows us to sub-grant funds to the different utilities for drinking water and clean water. And so one of the things we did shortly after the September meeting is meet with Waste Management, get a cost from them to replace all 33 of their pumps.
Yeah.
And so we have now agreed to sub-grant them $5 million to replace or buy backups for all 33 of their pumps. So they're right now in the process of trying to source all of those materials. And again, what they want to do is they want to make all of that infrastructure uniform so that one pump is not specific to this location or one pump is not specific, but that they have, if one pump goes down, I can just grab a pump from here and be able to use it. So
create continuity.
Yeah, and so we've agreed to do that as part of our implementation of the clean water, and that in addition or outside of our regulatory role, that's another thing that DPNR could do to try and help alleviate the situation.
All right, well, now I want to ask about public libraries. Very quickly, I want to, give us a rundown on the public libraries. What's the status? What's open? What's being worked on?
Sure. So right now, the Florence Williams Library is open Tuesday through Saturday to the public. In St. John, the Sproul Library, we're hoping to open between January and February. Both of our employees who lived on St. John, worked on St. John, unfortunately, we lost both of them during the course of this calendar year, earlier this year. And so didn't have enough staff to be able to now carry over. But we're trying to backfill those positions so that we can be open shortly in the beginning part of the new year. The Peterson Library and the Turnbull Library are both under construction. The Turnbull Library right now, the project should complete in the beginning of March of 2025. And so we're anticipating having a ribbon cutting maybe towards the end of March, early April 2025.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Oriol, I want to thank you so much. I know we can continue. There's so much happening with the department, but I do want to thank you for giving us that update. I really do appreciate you being here and for speaking with me today. Coming up, we'll hear from this week's panel, but first, let's take a look at the topics up for discussion.
This allows those young boys who are now young adults to file an action right now against all the enablers and all the people who are responsible.
Victims who were assaulted as young boys by former high school track coach Alfredo Bruce Smith can now pursue civil claims against enablers in court, thanks to a new law championed by Senator Maurice James. The legislation, Bill number 35-0402, was introduced by James and special ordered to the Senate floor during the November 20th legislative session. The measure eliminates the previous 2-year statute for limitations for civil claims, allowing survivors to take legal action at any time after recognizing they were abused as minors. It also aligns civil claims with the criminal code, which has long allowed prosecution for child sexual abuse without a time limit. James said she created the bill to address the devastating impact of cases like Smith, a former hall monitor and track coach at Charlotte Amalie High School. Smith admitted to sexually assaulting multiple students over a span of 15 years, often recording the acts, some of which occurred on school grounds. He is currently serving a 35-year prison sentence.
With Bruce Smith, the Department of Education needs to be held liable for what happened.
The measure allows survivors to hold not only perpetrators but also institutions accountable. Acting Governor Tregenza Roach signed the bill into law earlier this month, commending the legislature for recognizing the need to expand the statute of limitations for civil actions related to childhood sexual abuse. However, he also flagged areas of concerns and urged the legislature to revisit the measure. In his December 2nd transmittal letter, Roach wrote, First, the retroactivity of this measure will likely present due process challenges. I recommend a reasonable period of retroactivity be established, such as 10 years from the date of enactment. Additionally, the scope of the measure should be refined to clarify that actions may be brought not by any person, but by the victim or guardian on behalf of the victim. The measure should also clearly define abuse and exploitation and clarify the meaning of enablers, aiders, and abettors to foster unambiguous implementation. The Board of the Government Employees Retirement System has voted to delay a 3% increase in the employer contribution rate, which was set to take effect on January 1st, 2025. The decision came at a virtual board meeting last month after a letter from Governor Albert Bryan Jr. was read into the record by GERS Administrator Angel Dawson Jr.
I'm writing to formally request that the board reconsider and rescind the recent resolution to raise the employer contribution by 3%. At this time, this adjustment would place an additional $14 million burden on the government of the Virgin Islands, which is simply unsustainable under the current financial circumstances. As you are aware, we're still awaiting Congress's consideration of the rum cover-over tax extender, which is expected to reimburse the government employees retirement system with $90 million. This potential reimbursement is significant and will alleviate some of the financial strain on our retirement system. Raising the employer contribution at this juncture before Congress has made a determination would be premature.
The rum tax, known as the rum cover-over, is a critical funding source tied to a special fund created in 2022 to stabilize GERS. This fund uses excise taxes on Virgin Islands-made rum exported to the U.S. mainland to provide between $82 million and $158 million annually to the pension system, totaling about $4 billion over 30 years. The funding assumes a tax rate of $13.25 per proof gallon, but the rate is now $10.50, creating a significant shortfall. Both Bryan and Delegate to Congress Stacey Plaskett have been lobbying Congress to restore the higher rate, but no decision has been made. In his letter, Bryan asked the board to hold off on the increase to allow for clarity.
We kindly request that the board reconsider this measure at a later time. By then, we hope to have clarity regarding the renewal of the rum cover-over tax extender and the reimbursement of $90 million. Should Congress not act by that time, we will reassess the situation and explore what can be done.
The GERS board voted 4-1 to postpone the employer contribution rate increase to October of 2025.
The new recommended date of October 1, 2025 gives the plan sponsor 9 months of relief, the opportunity to work the increase into next year's fiscal budget, and the change of the date also aligns the start of the increase with the start of the new fiscal year.
Trustee Ronald Russell, who opposed the delay, argued that the board should push Bryan and Plaskett to press Congress and President Joe Biden directly for action on the rum cover-over extender.
I don't think our delegate and the governor has aggressively pursued the increase.
I'm especially proud to report that in 2023, our efforts will also yield an unprecedented level of financial support for UVI.
A year after he sat before lawmakers touting significant growth and strategic advancements under his leadership, Peter Chapman was gone. His contract as executive director of the UVI Research and Technology Park was not renewed by the Board of Trustees when it expired in August. Responding to WTJX newsfeed via text in April, RT Park Board Chair Edward Thomas Sr. stated there is nothing unusual about a board going in a new direction at any time since the board sets policy. As a matter of fact, this decision not to extend a new contract to the current executive director is the third one since I have been board chair. But Chapman's lawsuit filed on November 26 alleges otherwise. The former CEO claims he was forced out for resisting what he describes as, quote, illegal and unethical actions by board members, including Thomas. Filed in the District Court of the Virgin Islands, the suit details what Chapman calls a pattern of governance failures and retaliation. Chapman, who joined the RT Park in 2018, is credited with turning the organization around. Under his leadership, the RT Park generated over $15 million in financial support for UVI's educational programs, which represents more than 90% of what the RT Park has generated for the university since its inception, the lawsuit states. Central to the dispute, Chapman alleges, was his refusal to comply with board demands to divert additional funds to the University of the Virgin Islands. He describes being placed in a, quote, unenviable position of having to fend off efforts by members of the board to divert large additional sums of RT Park money for UVI's myriad of interests, including the medical school project. The lawsuit also accuses the board of unethical practices, including granting tax benefits in what Chapman calls a clear quid pro quo to secure a $3 million grant for UVI's Innovation Center. Another incident involves Thomas reportedly attempting to use RT Park funds for his church, which Chapman said would have caused legal and reputational damage. Chapman claims he was punished for his opposition through a manipulated performance evaluation process. Despite exceeding revenue goals and earning RT Park an award for an Economic Development Organization of the Year, Chapman was given a 70% performance rating for fiscal year 2020, a rating he claims was in contrast with his well-documented achievements during that year. According to the lawsuit, as a result of the escalating tensions wrought by RT Park's board's refusal to comply with the law, quote, the RT Park illegally non-renewed Peter Chapman's 3-year employment contract, which expired on August 31st, 2024. The board effectively terminated him for failure to violate Virgin Islands law and for challenging the board's violation of Virgin Islands law. The suit seeks damages under the Virgin Islands Whistleblower Act. Neither UVI RT Park nor Thomas has responded publicly to the allegations. Joining me on set to unpack these issues are attorney Key Walker, founder and managing attorney of Walker Legal, community advocate Malachi Thomas, and former Senator Donald Duggs Cole. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you.
Great to be here. All right. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the conversation with Commissioner Oriol. Now, Mr. Cole, to see where we are now as a territory when it comes to the land and water use plan, what are your thoughts?
I really want to congratulate the Department of Planning and Natural Resources and the Governor's Office brought us this far. I served in the legislature, the 23rd, 24th, and the 30th legislature. In the 24th legislature, I chaired the committee in Planning and Natural Resources, and the Land and Water Use Plan was in my committee. We were really moving towards getting this thing done. We had some bumps in the road. I think when I directed Commissioner Plaskett, who was then Commissioner of the Department, to turn over the maps, we were unable to get the maps. I was voted out to the Senate, and that was basically it for there, but I'm happy to see where we are today. I really want to commend Commissioner Oriol and the job that they have done bringing it thus far.
Now, Mr. Thomas, I want to ask you, what caught your attention from the earlier discussion?
I also want to congratulate the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. I think they're doing a wonderful job bringing their department and the government as a whole into the 21st century with the developments that they're doing. I would have liked, specifically the libraries. I would have liked to heard more about the plans for the archives and the contents of the library. I used to go to the bar library as a kid on Saturday for the reading programs. And it seems like we're developing the library for more tourist-facing activities. And I would have liked to hear about more local-facing programming and activities. But overall, very happy with what the department is doing.
Maybe we'll bring the commissioner back to have that discussion. But we're turning now to another important topic. The new law eliminating the statute of limitations for civil claims in childhood sexual abuse cases. Now, this law is clearly important, but what we should be worried about, the problematic areas that Acting Governor Tregenza Roach pointed out. Here's what Senator Maurice James had to say about that.
I do not intend to make any amendments based on the concerns expressed in the transmittal letter because I don't agree with what was written. For me, it's more important for justice to be served, and it would be unfair To me, it would just violate justice if we allow a lawsuit filed by a survivor to be blocked simply because persons or institutions who should have known that the children that were in their care were at risk, I will say, of being sexually abused by someone who was working for the institution. That would just be unjust. And so I do not agree, and I would not be amending that particular section on retroactivity that was suggested. I prefer to leave that to our courts to decide.
Now, Attorney Walker, I want to go to you. You're our resident legal expert right now. Now, tell me, what's your take on the new law? Senator Maurice James's position. Do you think it's going to hold up to scrutiny as far as the retroactivity and the recommendations that was given, and ultimately her decision to not make any changes to it?
I think the recommendations were valid ones. What Senator James did was put in place policy, which of course, the executive branch agreed with, government house agreed with. I think it's helpful to make improvements to the legislation. Legislation is rarely perfect on the first go around, and you want to be careful about leaving a decision to the court, especially on an issue of retroactivity, because if the court doesn't agree, whoever filed that particular case, their case gets dismissed, and they can't bring it back. So if there's an opportunity to make the correction or just make a tweak to ensure that these cases survive a challenge, and I think you should do so. I also think that the definition should be inserted. It should be clear to anyone who is filing a claim, defending a claim, the courts, as to what or who an enabler is. And I think those were useful recommendations, and hopefully the senator or some other senator will reconsider and possibly just tweak the legislation to improve it.
Now, Mr. Cole, I want to go to you. You've been there in the Senate body before. Now, this bill was special ordered to the floor. Do you think it would have benefited had it been heard in committee within Rules and Judiciary to get input from colleagues and from stakeholders?
I absolutely agree that the bill should have been held in committee where you have testifiers coming in. The fact remains, I know Lieutenant Governor Roach, he served in the legislature, and the comments that he made, I personally believe that he should have vetoed the legislation and then forced the legislature to override him, sending it back with those things. I don't believe that he should have signed it into law, because basically what he's saying in there is we're going to make the court deal with this issue. And Attorney Walker, spoke to the issue of the court. The court can go in and say, hey, we don't deal with it. Veto it, send back your recommendation, and ask the legislature to do that. Right now, we have a law that's on the books, and now has to be challenged by anyone who have a problem with that law.
Yeah, so kind of the notion of measuring twice, cut once type of thing. Now, Mr. Thomas, I want to ask you, do you think the Virgin Islands is ready to deal with some of the legal challenges or, that could come from this law being applied retroactively?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with Senator James on the retroactivity that is currently in the law, mostly because it's children. There is a grave and gross dereliction of duty for educational professionals to be noticed of an accusation like that and do nothing about it. And the fact that it's children, the depth of the danger and the offense might not become apparent, or they might not come to a point to share it with someone until later in their lives. And I think to put a 10-year, 15-year cap, imagine if it was a 10-year-old, that means that by their time they're 25 years old, they might really come to terms with what happened to them at 27 to say something. But because of the statute of limitations, they can't file civil claims against the institutions and the people that were tasked with protecting them. So I think, yes, I agree with the law in its state now. I do agree with Attorney Walker that definitions would help, for aiding and abetting and enablers and things like that. But in terms of retroactivity, I agree with the legislation in its current state.
Now, Attorney Walker, speaking of retroactivity, how far back do you think this should go, essentially, if we're putting a time limit on it? What should that time limit look like within the interest of justice?
I mean, honestly, I don't think you necessarily need one. The thing about child abuse is that abuse affects that victim for the rest of their life, right? And anyone who's been subjected to that abuse, no matter what, whether it happened 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, should be compensated for what they've been through and what they continue to go through. But I do think that you have to be very clear. The law and the Constitution requires that when you're dealing with retroactive activity, you're very clear. There has to be certain language in the statute to make sure that it withstands, a legal challenge. And I think that's what Lieutenant Governor Roach was trying to convey to the legislature when he penned his response.
Mr. Cole, I want to ask you, what do you think is the best way to hold institutions accountable when instances like this happen?
Hold the institution.
If we're talking any institution, specifically, let's talk about the Department of Education. Right. We've seen what's happened with the Bruce Smith case. How, as a territory, should we hold institutions accountable?
Well, we should be able to go to the law, look at what the law, and see whether or not the individuals who are charged with taking care of these young people and children did what they were supposed to do under the law. So you need to have enforcement. That's one of the major problems that we have here, is lack of enforcement. You have the laws on the books, but the enforcement aspect of it isn't coming forward, and that's the problem we have. You've got to be able to identify. I taught for years at Alida Conquering Junior High School, and if I saw something, the law said that I'm supposed to report it. And if I didn't report it, then the law is supposed to come at me. So I'm able, to make sure that I do what the law says. You got to look at the law. You got to look at enforcement. That's the problem.
Now, before we continue, Attorney Walker, I do want to go back to you. Do you believe that survivors should be able to take these cases to court with anonymity?
Yes. I mean, I think they should be permitted to file as a Jane Doe or a John Doe. And I think we should protect victims and survivors as much as possible. And when it comes to accountability, I think you should fire people. I mean, they're just, when you work in corporate America and you get your employee manual, there's something that says, well, this will subject you to suspension. This will subject you to a written reprimand. And there are certain things that subject you to termination. And I think when you have ignored, enabled, encouraged, or actually abused a child at school where they should be safe, I think you should be terminated. And I think that's how you hold institutions accountable, because institutions are people. When you sue the Department of Education, all you're doing is taking money from the government's treasury. When you're talking about holding people accountable, fire them.
Yes. Now, I want to move on to the government employees retirement system, which recently decided to postpone its 3% employer contribution increase after Governor Bryan requested more time to gain clarity on the rum cover over tax extender. Now, Mr. Cole, does delaying this 3% increase help in any way?
Well, it delays it because the government of the Virgin Islands, as the governor said, don't have the finances to put towards the GERS.
But is it just kicking the problem down the road?
I hope they're not kicking it down the road. And I agree with what former Senator Russell stated in terms of the aggressive nature of which the delegate to Congress, the governor, the lobbyists, and everybody went towards Mr. Joe Biden and the Congress. I'll tell you this, under the Trump administration, when Trump left office, he signed 4 years of cover over money. President Biden had the Congress, and they didn't extend that. I'm saying that the aggressive nature wasn't done, and I agree with Senator Russell. I have bemoaned this over the airways. I've spoken about it. You have to be able to go. President Biden comes to St. Croix every year, party down here with us, understands what it is. He know the rum fact, he know what it is. You got to go and tell him, listen, man, you need to get this done. Use it, just like he passed the chip sack and went across the board and I went across the table and got the Republicans to come along. You need to get it done, and I believe the aggressive nature wasn't done. So I'm hoping before the term is up that they get it done. The governor is in D.C. right now. The delegate is there. Hopefully they can bring it home, but we need that. We need that extender.
Now, Mr. Thomas, do you agree with the criticism from Trustee Russell that, does he have a point with what he's saying as far as them needing to be more aggressive?
I can be honest with you. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if the government transitioned from a defined benefit system to a defined contribution system decades ago. And it's something that I've been advocating for since I've been home and really heavily this year. If the government, I published the article earlier this year with a plan for transitioning to a system like that. And under my plan, we could be saving the government $49.5 million a year. I know that fiscal year 2024, because the rum cover over rate was reduced from the $13.25 to $10.50, that there is a $34 million shortfall for fiscal year 24 for funding GERS. So extending the match is 23.5% now. Extending it to me is just kicking the problem down the road. It gives them time to try to find the money. I don't know where they're going to find money to pay that 3% increase. I know the government right now is really in a cost-cutting, a cost-cutting era. So no, I think we need to transition our retirement system from defined benefit to defined contribution, reduce employer match from 23.5% to 7.5%, have employees contribute 7.5%, and offer employees 403B and Roth 403B retirement plans. And if I could add, this would also solve the issue that employees of the Port Authority are having right now with figuring out what's going to happen to their pension when they transition to the public-private partnership company. If they had a 403 or B or a Roth 403B, they would be able to port their retirement accounts easily. There wouldn't be any problem.
Now, Attorney Walker, the delegate has stated that she had recommended previously that, when it comes to the special purpose vehicle, that it had been done at the 1050 rate rather than at 1325. Why do you believe the government based the GERS, plan at the 1325 rate?
Because it's always increased. Whenever we make the pitch, the rate is increased to the 1325 rate. And even as the government and the governor and his lobbying team continue to lobby for the increase, they're lobbying for it retroactively as well. So the numbers for everything to add up for us to bring the relief that needed to be brought to GRS, the higher rate was favorable. And I don't think it was an error. I think that they are aggressively lobbying. They are aggressively lobbying that it be applied retroactively. And I think with the change in the administration, there's this, renewed effort to continue to lobby aggressively. We're now lobbying a different administration, so I think we should remain hopeful.
Mr. Thomas?
With that.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that even at the $13.25 cover over rate, that there are a couple of underfunded years in 2031, 2032, 2033 or something like that. I think the special purpose entity that was created was important, definitely, in staving off insolvency, which we would be experiencing right now. But it doesn't completely fix the problem of our pension system functioning with a severely unfunded liability.
Nor was there ever a claim that it would. And we have to remember that. It was to bring immediate relief to the pension system, but there was still work that needed to be done by the legislature. There's still work that needed to be done by the GRS, and it was never claimed to be the end-all, be-all saving of the system.
All right. Mr. This is very great input. Now let's shift gears to the whistleblower lawsuit filed by ex-RT Park chairman Peter Chapman. Now, Mr. Cole, what impact do you think these allegations will have on the reputation of the RT Park?
Well, I want to see the court resolve this. And again, I want to go back to the 20-foot legislature again when I don't want to be here, I shepherd the RT Park legislation to the legislature on behalf of the University of the Virgin Islands. And when I read what he's asking for, that RT Park was set up to support the University of the Virgin Islands. Within the University of the Virgin, Dr. Ken, when they came and they lobbied, it was for the enhance and support monies to the University of the Virgin Islands. Basically what I'm seeing, the chairman was asking, well, listen, can we take some money? And Dr. Hall was asking to put to the medical school, and he is saying, well, hey, no, I ain't doing that. You know, you're violating the law. I need to see what the court says in terms of that violation, because the system, the park was set up specifically and purposefully to assist the University of the Virgin Islands funding and setting up this Silicon Valley that we're supposed to have over in St. Croix, using the lines, the fiber optic lines that come out of there and all of that. So I would want to see what the court says about it.
Now, Attorney Walker, do you think that these allegations could hurt future partnerships, potential partnerships and investments with the RT Park?
No. And honestly, I would have to say, I think they should have settled this issue with Mr. Chapman a long time ago before the lawsuit was filed. Because at the end of the day, he performed under the contract, right? He outperformed what was expected of him under the contract. And it's my understanding that there is a particular amount or percentage of the revenue that's to be given to UVI. So what I think you have here is the RT Park, which is innovation, youth, a desire to reinvest in the RT Park itself and to develop that RT Park team. And then you have a competing consideration with the UVI board, which is less concerned with this innovation and this building up of the RT Park, and more concerned with funding UVI and funding certain projects that were important to Dr. Hall or anyone else at the time. But ultimately, he had a contract, he performed, they did not properly evaluate him, they violated the contract, and they really should have settled this before it even became a lawsuit.
Now, in his lawsuit, Chapman claims that he was pressured to divert more RT Park funds to UVI and faced retaliation for resisting. At last year's budget hearing, he presented a pie chart showing most RT Park funds went to UVI, prompting questions from Senate President Novo Francis Jr. Let's take a look.
Are you going to continue to give away the shop? Or, what happens? What does the law require you to give on an annual basis to the University of the Virgin Islands? So I think I see there's like 40, from the pie chart, is almost 42% that actually goes towards the university.
Yes, thank you for the question, Senate President Francis. So there is no stipulation, there's no requirement in the legislation, in the statute, Title 17, which is our North Star, that we dedicate a specific amount of money to the university. The only thing that Title 17 says is that we are to provide financial support for the university. We're engaged in a dynamic internal discussion right now about how we ensure that there's equilibrium, if you will. We want to ensure that as we continue to support UVI, we are not cannibalizing, if you will, the other critical needs that we have within the realm of our primary obligation to the territory, which is economic development.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, I want to get your thoughts on that clip that we just saw.
Generally, I was very surprised to hear that he was leaving, because like Attorney Walker, he outperformed his duties under his contract with the RT Park. I think what we really should celebrate in this moment is, avenues that citizens have to inspire, create, and realize a transparent and accountable government, because From some of the things that's being alleged in the suit, it kind of gives sight to poor corporate governance that's happening on the part of the board of directors of the RT Park. Poor governance that we might not be aware of absent of this suit.
Yeah. Mr. Cole, why do you think the university is kind of getting the lion's share of the RT Park funds? Do you think that that's fair?
Well, that was the purpose of the legislation. So we put it into the thing. Fair is, yeah, as he said, there wasn't any specificity written into the legislation. That's what Mr. Chapman said. So the board that governs the RT Park now has the authority to say, hey, listen, we want to give this and this amount to the University of the Virgin Islands. That was the intent of setting up the RT Park, to assist in the financial support of the RT Park. Yeah. Thus, the other issues that surround his performance and all of that, yes, they should have paid the guy. But don't get away from the core of this enabling legislation that states you're supposed to help the University of the Virgin Islands. And cannibalizing, I don't know about cannibalizing, if we give them 75% and the university uses it, because I want to see the medical school built, and if funding is going towards a medical school, I want to see it built. Again, I was there when that whole thing came about, so I might be biased, you know, but that's the way I look at it.
Attorney Walker, now Chapman is alleging, some unethical practices like granting tax benefits for financial favors. Now, how do you think these claims should be investigated? And then also, if he knew that these things were happening while he was there, why not say something while you were there?
He did. And so what he's saying is, because I wouldn't play ball and because I raised these issues and because I challenged the board, number one, they denied me the bonus that I was entitled to. Number two, they didn't renew my contract. So this dispute between Mr. Chapman and UVI had been going on prior to the non-renewal of his contract. And I think because of egos, you have this, and I don't want to use the word, I'll use the word seasoned. You have this seasoned group of directors who is concerned with UVI, and then you've got Mr. Chapman, who is concerned about the RT Park, and it's a conflict. And I think the board should have resolved that conflict before it blew out of proportion, because at the end of the day, that RT Park is very successful. The investors that they've brought in, not only are they investing in the RT Park, they're investing in a community. So we talk about bringing young people home. This is the work that young people do. And the more investors that we attract to the RT Park, the more young people we attract back home. And I think that's what Mr. Chapman was focused on. Meanwhile, the board was focused on the medical school, and it's a conflict that should have been resolved.
Yeah. Mr. Thomas, I see you shaking your head in agreement with Attorney Walker. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, complete agreement. I don't even have anything to add. It was well said and thorough.
Now, if these claims are investigated, who should be held accountable?
If these claims are investigated, who should be held accountable?
If they're proven true.
Well, the board of directors, and if there was impropriety on the part of any individuals, the individuals separately from the board as well.
All right.
In my opinion.
Now, before we close out, let's tackle a lighter but relatable topic for anyone who's flying this holiday season. Now, American Airlines is testing a system to handle gate lice, and those are passengers who crowd the boarding area and try to sneak on before their group is called. Their new system actually beeps and rejects boarding passes scanned too early, sending those impatient travelers back to wait for their turn. Now, first off, who on this panel has ever heard of the term gate lice?
That's what I wanted to know. That's so derogatory. A gate lice? Is a gate lice?
You're a gate lice?
No, I'm just saying. That's what they're saying. Yeah, gate lice.
Oh, gate louse.
Gate lice.
Now, Attorney Walker, I know you like to travel. Mm-hmm. Tell me, what are your thoughts on this?
I love it. I mean, just get out the way. And you're taking up my baggage space. I paid money for this level that I'm supposed to be boarding at, and I'm trying to put up my bag, and here you are taking up my space. I need you to get into your group and to board the flight when your group is called.
Now, Mr. Thomas, do you think this is going to make travelers a little bit more responsible?
I don't know. I think shame is an effective societal mechanism for, enforcing behavior. Me particularly, my prime travel experience is to be the last person on the plane as they're getting ready to close the doors, because I want to sit on the plane for as little time as possible. So, just get on the plane is my thing.
Mr. Cole, do you think this is going to bring some kind of personal accountability? Mr. Thomas says we should bring back public shaming.
Shame, some people ain't have no shame box. They ain't got no shame box. They're going to still be jumping the line, and they want to go up because they want to put their big luggage over top, but they don't want to pay the cost of shipping it. So they want to get in there so they can put the 213 thing that they have under the arm and all that kind of stuff. So some people don't have no shame box.
Okay, Mr. Cole, don't let me find out that you have been a gate louse in the past.
Listen, one thing, if I travel with my wife, right, I got to stay in line. But if my wife ain't there, I either try to sneak up.
She keeps you in order.
No, she keep me in line.
So if your wife isn't there, then you're a gate louse.
I might try to sneak up.
And it's going to beep on you if that's the case.
I got no shame box. So you're shaming me.
Well, that's all the show we have for you today. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. In the meantime, for your news updates, tune into WTJX Newsfeed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. From all of us here at WTJX Channel 12, take care.